I think we should be live. If so, hi, welcome to Thursday's Vinny G Live. If you're not familiar, Tuesdays and Thursdays we try and just get on here. Sometimes there's guests, and we just like to have a touch point connection with family here at Redemption Flagstaff. And Tuesdays are a little more lighthearted. Thursdays we try and take a theological, doctrinal, or just social topic, cultural topic that we think is a good thing to talk about in this season, or in really any season, and we just have an opportunity to talk about it now. So we jump around to different things, and just this week we were chatting about what's something we could jump into, and this topic of singleness has been one that Anthony and I have we've lived in for for a while, and then we just have a heart for big time. And so we thought we'd take an opportunity to talk through on singleness, and what is it, like why is it, what's the Bible say about it, what do we see in the gospel that really kind of helps to is it on the thing?
Wi-Fi maybe.
Does it look a little blurry? Are we a little blurry right now? All right, I think that should get us back. And we rolling on the camera there, or on the computer?
Yeah, actually,
all right.
It looks like in the same feed even.
Yeah, it should just reconnect us. All right, sorry about that. That was my fault. I forgot to change the turn off the Wi-Fi that we have in this building, because our Wi-Fi at our office is terrible. So again, we're just jumping into singleness. Karina already with I think what's probably going to be the top comment of everything, and so you don't need to, no one else really needs to comment, but please do comment if you have other questions or comments, thoughts. But singleness equals more money and free time, booyah, which that's just true.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I guarantee you that if you are single, there will be more money and there will be more free time. So,
yeah, as long as you steward the money well.
That's true. I guess if you just are a terrible spender, then it is less. But in general, that would be very true. So,
or if you're dating Jeff Bezos, then you would have more.
Oh yeah, so I guess that's true. If you date someone who has more, so if you're a guy who dates a gal that just happens to have a
my buddy's
killing
gonna
job.
get married to a doctor. I'm proud of him.
What kind of doctor?
So ear doctor?
Oh, that's the best.
Audiologist? I don't know.
That's kind of doctor.
Yeah.
So singleness. We're just going to run through some questions that are just questions that we've wrestled through, we've navigated through, we think are helpful and important to talk through kind of in this area. If you have other questions or clarifying questions based on what we're saying, if you disagree with something we're saying, by all means, feel free to put that in there as well, and we can talk further through that. So I'm going to ask Anthony the first question, and then we'll just kind of just work back and forth through this idea, and then go from there. So Anthony, we chose this topic of singleness, and maybe you can even speak for both of us, but even just as a heart for our church. Why is this so important? Like, why is this something we would choose to talk about?
Yeah, I think that a lot of times singles don't feel seen or heard or known in the church, and so I think that's just good enough reason to talk about something.
Give a thumbs up if you think that's true.
Yeah, but I think it's there's single people in our church and there's single people in the world, and so I think sometimes the way the church is viewed, it's viewed as a place for families and nuclear families or people with kids, and not a place for singles or people that don't fit that kind of walk of life.
Right.
And so I think that's plenty of reason for us to talk about, because there is a place in the church for singles, and our churches should be full of singles. Our churches really should be full of every demographic that we see in the city that we are in my opinion. And so I think singles make up a big part of the city we're in. And so I think that's a big reason to talk about singleness and talk about what the Bible says about it, or why. So
I think like there's the realities of, and we're going to delve more into some of the specifics about even why we'd even answer that question that way, but just even to saying that, I really just emphasize what you're saying in regards to that we are a body, and we should represent the totality of our people, you know. And so when the church is like more formed and set up for a part of the body, it seems to be pretty contrary to what the Scripture offers about us, you know. So
I mean, you can't think of a lot of like pastors who preach who are single, You know, like I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I don't think it is right or wrong, but so I think that just gives us more of a reason to try to have a time where we talk about something like this because, just because those voices are not heard as much, and hopefully we can speak to them. So
totally.
Well, let me ask you this: What we often hear. Dane Renford, let's see what he says. So Dane said, I feel like Jess Channery would be a really good guest speaker on this. I mean, she probably would be if she wasn't dating two guys right now. She's dating two.
Yeah, she's doing not singleness.
Yeah, doubleness. I'm just kidding.
That's not true.
She's going to be mad.
We're not true. That's not true at all. It's very inaccurate.
She's
not very inaccurate. She's, but
this is how we get in trouble.
This is how we get in trouble.
So we'll blame it on Dane. It was Dane's fault.
Thanks, Dane.
Let me ask you this question then. Why do you think, so what we hear a lot is singles feel like they're less, like they're a lower citizen in churches often.
Great.
Why do you think that they feel that way? What do you think's going on? And speak to all of it. Speak to maybe there's some correction of the singles themselves, and there's correction of the church too. So.
Yeah, I'll handle the correction of the church. You can call it.
Okay.
I look. If we're honest, and you and I now we've been pastoring up here in Flagstaff. We started this church in 2012.
Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, like our church was 99% college students back then.
Yeah.
Which for the most part meant 97% single. You know, there were kind of a couple young marrieds and stuff like that. But everyone was single back then, you know. And so when you have that, I think it's easy to kind of talk through singleness. Everyone kind of feels that. But oftentimes I think the direction of the contemporary evangelical church, it's centered around the family. And what happens is I think the leadership then ends up speaking and the verbiage they use, the illustrations they use, they usually are tied to that season of life, both I think for the person speaking, the teacher, the preacher, but also as they see who's in the community.
Yeah.
And
like often the preacher's illustrations are all about their two sons.
Sons.
I mean, they're kids. I'm sorry. They're not their two sons.
Especially when they're 5 and 2.
Yeah, 5 and 2.
Totally.
Where the second son is very more dangerous.
Right. Totally. Which is good about that is because we are the children of God. So it's always applicable in that sense. But I think unintentionally, I think it's just even a confession from me. I think I can easily fall into preaching in such a way that even unintentionally, the verbiage and the wording we use, how we talk about stuff, the illustrations we say, they tend to be very familial. The other part of that is the way we then not just talk about the current situation, but the way we talk about, the way we'll talk about marriage as being kind of like it becomes the goal, like a goal, a sub goal of Christianity is like, hey, glorify God and do all that. But get married, like that. And I think it's not even, that explicit, although in some circles I think it is, and has been especially. But I think even just in the way we talk about things, it's that idea of like what you celebrate the most becomes culture, right? And we often celebrate like good husbands and wives and family and kids and all that stuff.
Finding a spouse is a good thing.
Finding a spouse is a really good thing, and so because I think those things are true, and we celebrate those a lot, it becomes like, well, that must be the goal, right? Like that must be part of this is I have to get into the church, I have to be faithful to Jesus, but there's always this, like if I want to really do it, I need to get married. And so that's the church pressure. And last thing I'd say, I think there is a pressure that comes from our culture at a certain level as well, that if you are not living your life the way the quote-unquote world would call you to, then that must mean you must do it this other way, and this other way means find a husband. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that's I'll add on to that before kind of the correction to perspectives. But I've increasingly realized I feel like a lot of the sickness in the American church is like syncretism. And I don't know if you guys know syncretism, I'm sure most of you do, but syncretism is this idea of two things that are almost like opposed or shouldn't go together necessarily, come together. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but two things come together in a way and create like a new thing together. And so a lot of American church is American, or our culture, or whatever, the things around us. And so I'm not trying to say all American culture is bad, but there's idols in our culture that we've allowed to come into the church. And so I think when it comes to singleness, there's just certain idols and certain practices in our culture as a whole that we've allowed to come into the church. And so I think the idea of the nuclear family is one of these idols in our culture in some places and spaces. And I think even just thinking through, like, in our culture, there's a heavy practice of just like, this is my family. I don't really interact very much with other people. I don't really include other people in my family. It's my family and that's it.
Yeah.
And I think because that cultural practice is in the church, singles feel that too. They feel the fences around the house, so to speak, but in the church too. Right. And so I think there's that aspect too. So I think there's very much like a practice of fencing off our families from our greater family, the family of God, the other singles in our family. And so, so I think we bring that practice into the church.
No, and I'd say too, I think like we've, there's a holistic view of like what we've preached that isn't just specific to marriage, but we just haven't done a great job over the history of the church in truly communicating like Jesus is sufficient, like truly sufficient. Like you really don't need something else. Jesus is that for you. And I think through the drips of American Christianity, Western Christianity, that's just a truth, not just with the marriage thing, but in general, we don't think Jesus is enough.
Yeah.
You know, it's always that Jesus plus this for not just salvation, but for just joy in life.
Yeah.
And so I think then if you're a single, you're like, okay, I need to add something else to be able to make this thing work because Jesus isn't satisfactory.
Totally.
And I don't want to just put that on singles and say like, hey, you need to believe this, although that's probably part of it in there as well. But also, have we preached effectively at our end on a consistent level for people to say, no, truly, like, he's totally enough, like 100%. So,
no, that's good. So I think if I'm going to correct singles in the church and correct my own heart when I was single in the church, I think that in our culture right now, we have this tendency to hear when something is wrong, and we convince ourselves that it's wrong everywhere and wrong in every situation. Okay. And so I think there are certainly churches that do not love singles well, that idolize the nuclear family. Yeah. And people have called that out, and I think that's good. But then I think what happens sometimes is we go, that every church, that's a problem. Every single church, that's happening. Right. Yeah. And so we almost nitpick when it comes to this. And this is for any issue. It isn't just singles that do this. It's everybody that has an issue with the greater church. A lot of times I've seen bring it into their local church when it might not be a problem in that local church. Yeah. And so I even noticed that as a pastor in a variety, not on this issue really in our church that much, but on other theological issues, that sometimes somebody's background, they're coming from something, and then they come in here and they're like, why don't you ever talk about this thing? And I'm like, we do talk about that a lot. Like,
you've been here for a week.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I don't know. I think we do. And sometimes they're merited. What they're saying, there is merit to what they're saying. But I think sometimes our baggage forms how we view situations and things. So I just think that's something for us to think through and know. And so when we're feeling sensitive to those things, that sometimes it's our baggage. It doesn't mean it's wrong or we shouldn't bring it up, but my baggage changes a lot. I remember one time me and you got into it about, I was mad at something you said to me via text years ago. And I remember I was like, dude, you said this, bro. And you were like, did I say that? And you weren't like trying to be a jerk. You was like, let me go back and look at this. Right, I remember that. And we looked at the text, and you didn't say that at all. Like, you said something like, maybe in the same neighborhood, but maybe not even that. Yeah, no, I remember that. It was like you had asked a question, but it was nowhere near what I had thought. But because of my own baggage, I heard it that way. And I remembered it that way, and I internalized it that way. And that's not, that's my own stuff to deal with. And you were really gracious in that. But I think it was important for me too in that moment to go, oh, this is me. This is how I've been hurt in this way before, so I thought I was being hurt in this way when I wasn't.
Right.
And that's not always the situation, but I think that's sometimes the situation.
Oh, totally. I just add too, just on that end, you know, like I got saved in college, right? And so then some of that stuff around like some of this family stuff and kind of the idol of that a little bit in the church culture is somewhat a newer revelation to me, because it wasn't, you know, I got saved and I was really involved with Campus Crusade, which is like mostly singles, you know, you're in college ministry. And then I had a home church, but I mostly went to their college ministry, which was mostly singles. And so like my early shaping was like, oh, this is like, it's a singles thing. Like this is kind of what's going on. It's really, I've learned a lot more, obviously, since we planted, and we've seen the kind of changes in our church and its demographics and stuff of how easy it is to trend that way. But I know that process for me, I remember even being a single, making that transition to kind of more familial space. Yeah. I think there was like a lack of understanding of like how hard it is to be married and have kids at the same time. And this isn't it's so hard to be, you know, but it's the idea of like I expected some things that were just unrealistic, given the fact that like it's a busy life. You know what I mean? And
well, I mean, I love Jesus' teaching in Matthew 19. He reframes marriage for everybody. He doesn't really reframe it. He just says, like, this was what my intent was from the beginning. Yeah. And it's a covenant that basically shouldn't be broken. Mm-hmm. And the disciples, their response to that privately with Jesus is, this is like a hard teaching, Jesus.
Oh, that's
and
right.
Jesus' response back to them is like, marriage isn't for everybody. Right. Like, you know, like, and so I think that totally touches on what you're saying. Like, you know, marriage is difficult. It's not for everybody.
Yeah. So I think having that perspective from a place of singleness to say, one, to have a healthy view of your married brothers and sisters as well, and that they do need care, and so when that's being talked about, it isn't like just because that's all we talk about. It's like, it's an important thing that they need help. You know what I mean, and that type of thing, mixed with some of the times where maybe, and I know that singles will not feel as loved or welcomed in by families. Some of it is, it's just, man, you sit down with these families, they are maxed out at capacity. Totally. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like, I don't know how to take care of my life right now. And so I think there's some of that graciousness that obviously goes both directions. I think as you kind of navigate that question of like, why can they feel less than? I think it's there's a whole litany of reasons. But
I think to bring up another point, that something you said was making me think about it, was I also think our churches have been very like age centered, and like there's a program for every age, and I don't think that's always wrong. I think that's okay in a lot of instances.
Yeah, a lot of times you're very pro that.
Yeah, I'm very pro because
in the right context.
Yeah, I think that people learn well better in some of those environments, and so I'm okay with that. But sometimes that's made us go too far that direction, and we expect things for our exact demographic in the church, and then we also expect to only interact with our exact demographic in the church. And so when those things happen, then I think it can make singles feel like, well, you know, I'm the only single person in this whole church, so who do I interact with? What is for me?
Where's my place?
And so I think that's why I think there's a balance for churches, attention to go, okay, we want people to learn and grow in environments that will really foster that and help that. And I think sometimes age things and restrictions help with that. But then the tension of, but we want our community to be a community that has all sorts of people in it, and that those environments don't primarily make up how we join together and love and care for each other. So I think that would be our own kind of, I don't know if it's consumerism or whatever. It's just how the church has done church for the last 30 years, 40 years even.
And here, I know we're kind of camping on this question a lot, but I think just one more thing that I think is really important is to bring in the gendered aspect of this. The church in America consists, I think it's like 57% female. I think it's
more female than male.
Significantly, right? Like 10-15% higher. And I think obviously in our culture there's a reality of I think because we've and it's not just the church, it's been our culture for hundreds of years, and the church has bought into that in some healthy ways and some unhealthy ways certainly, but just this, all right, like you're a woman, and so part of your role is to find that man that's going to like lead you and be your husband and all that kind of stuff. And I think that the unhealthy part of that has then in these places, especially for women more than young men. So when you start talking about singleness for women, I think has been more difficult for young men in our churches, because even more so given the structures of traditional church, traditional values within our society. It's, hey, like women, like wait and get your man and then progress. Right now, obviously, everything has progressed beyond that, but I think like the realities of that historical aspect of it still play significant roles in the cultures of the church.
Yeah, like almost like their purpose, they don't have purpose until they're a wife or a mom, type of thing.
Yes.
Which we would say is not true.
Absolutely, to be very clear.
But
and even if like
pressure,
that's the chief purpose, you know what I mean? You can do some good things, but once you can then fulfill these roles, then you've really finally reached where you're supposed to be. And so I do want to acknowledge that I think for young women, I think it is even probably more difficult than for, I don't want to just say young, but just for single women than it is for single men in the church, probably more difficult as well. So just to acknowledge that piece of it.
The aspect of even just the ratios, that's just going to make it harder. Say you want to date someone that you're looking for a godly Christian man, but there's not as many godly Christian men in your church. That's going to be tough.
Yeah. I mean, that absolutely plays a role. I think a little bit more of that'll come into that next one. So I'll ask you this: so why is singleness a low desired trait in our culture and humanity? So
that's good. I just want to read Karina's response. She goes, "I may not become a wife or a mother because dating sucks and I'm awkward. So thanks for addressing that. Our worth doesn't come from that." You're welcome, Karina.
And honestly, like blissfully awkward. Like you're, Karina, you're like the best kind of awkward. We love you. So
you embrace it. So that's why we love you.
And dating does suck at real levels. So no.
So the question, back to the question.
But why is singleness a low desired trait in our culture and church, humanity?
I think it's probably there's a human core need to want intimacy, like all humanity. I think you'd find this in every culture. It just probably looks different in every culture, but we want intimacy, we want relationship with people, and we probably even want romantic relationship. Those are probably human core needs that, maybe not core needs, but core desires is probably a better way to put it, that I think ultimately all can be found in God, and so that's why I think they're in us. And so I think that's why that is a low desired trait in general. But then I think when you come to our culture, and every single movie has a romance storyline in it.
Right, that's good.
There's very few movies that don't have
any type of love subplot.
And they're usually my favorite movies. But every single movie has I wouldn't be shocked if it's 90% of movies have some sort of a romance, pursuing a romance angle within the movie. And so, I mean, I think it gets funny, even like every single Disney movie pretty much has that until recently. They started to stop. Like Moana, I think, doesn't have it. I'm trying to think.
Yeah, nothing. But Toy Story 4 does.
Toy Story 4
the bow on that is with Bo.
Yeah,
with Woody and Buzz. So
spoiler alert. But that's a good point. Like inanimate objects that
need love.
That need love. Also, sidebar. What if these toys can exist forever? What a horrible eternity on the earth for these toys. Anyways, all the trauma these toys have been. That's what I'm saying. But anyways, so I think when stories are powerful and stories shape us, and so if that's a primary story that we're all watching, and so I don't think watching those things is bad or wrong or whatever. I think they tell great stories, but when that's always a goal in the story or always a part of the story, then we're going to convince ourselves for our stories that should be a part of it too. And so then that affects how we preach, that affects how we teach, that affects how we disciple one another. That affects the church in all sorts of ways. And so it's this underlying current that's there. And so when we are single, we convince ourselves something's missing or something's lost or we don't have enough of something, and even sometimes we don't notice that we're doing that, right? So I've noticed, this is a funny trend I've noticed, is a lot of people that get married and don't, like, it's not like they hate marriage, but it's also not like they're just like it's the best ever. Like they have a pretty good view of it.
Yeah.
A lot of those types, when they meet single people and know single people, they're like, dude, you gotta get married. Once you get married, like that's the thing you need. I've heard people in our church say it, and I have to stop. I usually stop them and go, hey, please don't say that. Like that's like kind of messed up to say, because one, I don't know if you would paint your marriage in this sort of a like chief end or goal type of a light, and then two, like it demeans them. It makes them feel like being single is less. And so
and it's just also, we would probably say, like, theologically inaccurate. You know what I mean? Like that's not even, you know what I mean? Like putting that as this thing that has to be out there. Yeah, and it's interesting because even with like the entertainment piece of it that you bring up, is there's a significant reality to this of, and what you watch and what you see is a massively idealized version of that, you know, as well, which does sets all of us up for failure. I mean,
Well, sorry. No, I want to interrupt, because not only is it romance in every story that we watch, but a like soulmate completing me, making my life whole. Romance is in every story. So it's not even just romance. It's often this sort of, if I get into this relationship, then things will be fine.
Yeah, that's
things
arrival.
will be better. Then I've arrived.
Right.
And we believe it. We all believe it. We all chase after it.
Yeah.
We all,
even as married folks.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I think just to piggyback on some of that stuff. I mean, I think like, I think you can hear this question and say, well, why is there a low desired trait in our culture? And you're seeing that, like, I think people would say, well, it's not. Like, there's a trend towards singleness and travel and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Which, statistically, all that stuff is very true for the millennial generation, is actually changing quite a bit with Gen Z based on early statistics and stuff they're looking at. But that being said, that even in that, though, what you see is in all of this travel, in all this, what rose out of that is this massive kind of serial dating, perpetual, let me find the next person. So it was different, but it really was just it was just another side of the same coin of saying, hey, like, but I don't want to be alone. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, that alone doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel satisfactory. Yeah. And so let me just pursue it in shorter term relationships, just be with this person for a bit or whatever. And so even if you were to look at like culture and say, oh, well, it's trending, it's really not. Like, there's still this, well, I don't want to be alone by myself. I need to have this person in my life, and
millennials might be unique in that too, from the study, because I've been reading a lot on all the generations, and what I'm finding is us millennials we have very weird kind of views and things we're doing compared to Gen Z below us and compared to all the generations above us. So I think that does color it a bit. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: How are singles a blessing to the church? I think we've already touched on it a bit, but what are some ways you just know that singles are a blessing to the church and to the world? Gosh,
I'll just look right at the camera and say, like, if you are single and you are watching this, and this isn't not meant to be like, if you're not single and watch this, that this isn't true for you, but really just to make it as explicit as possible. If you're single watching this, like, you rock. Like, I mean, like, there is so much to be that, like, legitimately, personally, I am thankful for the single friends that I have in my life, for the single people in our church, and so there's a bunch of things. I'll run through a couple. I'm sure you have stuff you'll add to it. Why are singles a blessing to the church? One, and this, I want to be careful because it's not like we can use you. But there is a reality of just like, and I remember when I was single, I just did have in general more time, right? I was able to enter into and to be a blessing to people that didn't have that same freedom and that same time. And it's massively needed. It goes back to kind of what we were talking about before of like, there are real difficulties that also exist in family and marriage in different parts of our city culture world, that when you're single, you truly have this incredible opportunity to have a little more freedom, a little more time, to go out at nights, to, you know what I mean? You don't have to be home at 7:30 to put the kids down, all these types of things. and just being able to be present in these multiple spaces. Now, I do think the church, and I don't mean necessarily our church, but if we have done this, we'll confess that too, but I think we can abuse that freedom and easily be like, well, hey, you're single, so you can just do it, which is egregious and sinful on the ends of the leaders that we might do that. And again, if we've done that, we're sorry, but I don't want that to undercut. No, when you're single, like there's just a reality of like you have more time, you have freedom to move and to say yes and no to pretty much whatever you want to say yes and no to without having to ask anyone else. You know? So I think there's just a real reality to that. And then listen, the church consistently, if you look throughout history, so there's a practical aspect to it of like the church will die if young people and single people aren't part of it. It just will, like, and that's just been the history and tradition that we need continued influx of those who are younger, those who are single, who are older. I mean, because of not just what you can do and what your time and energy can provide, but there's just a reality to your presence gives life to those around you simply because you are part of the body of Christ. And so I want to be very clear to any of the singles listening and for all of us to learn that even if a single doesn't contribute a lot, right? Like they're not always burning all the stuff that necessarily needs to be done. Yeah. Like your presence as being a Christian that is part of the body of Christ helps the church, right? Like it is a blessing to the church because the church is supposed to be together in that.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, I mean, two things I would add to that is I think first, they're just like added family members, added, strong family members a lot of times. I think a lot of our singles, even though I know they would probably say, man, we are all across the board and how strong we are or not, I think them being able to lead themselves well is a strength to the church. And so even when they're going through a lot of times because they're able to lead themselves well, they're helping and all that kind of stuff. So I think in my own family, when different single people have been part of it more often, it feels like I have this extra family member that's like an awesome person in our family,
That's really good.
And I think it's true for the greater church too. When we have this, it just feels like an extra awesome family member to have in our family. So I think there's that. I think the second thing would be their perspectives on the world and just how they see things. I think everybody that's not single kind of, I think sometimes we get tunnel vision and we just see things certain ways. We don't know. We can't engage with culture as well. We can't know why people think the way they do in our culture. And a lot of times I think our singles are prophetic voices to us.
Yeah, that's great.
To tell us, hey, this is what's going on out there. This is what it looks like out there. This is how it's going. And then I think besides like all the biblical implications that Paul talked about with just, I mean, if singles can just do much more, they just can't. I'm not even saying in the sense of time. They just, because they are stewarding their lives well and their own individual relationship with God.
Right.
And I don't mean this to be demeaning. They don't have to worry about discipling these three little kids like I am constantly kind of not worrying about, but it's at the front of my mind.
Yeah.
And that's okay. God's brought me into that. That's what He has for me. They don't, so they can put themselves in situations to love people really well.
Yeah.
That need the love as well. So I've always envisioned, man, I think one of the most powerful churches for getting work done, like in the community, would be a church full of singles and empty nesters. Like that's what I think, or people
good.
Older, because I think they just have an ability
that's great.
Care for people and love people, and so and strength to do it, and even like Brandon said, energy to do it. But so I think perspective, added family member, a prophetic voice, I think, often, and then they can do hard things.
Right.
They just often can.
And let's remember, like, the mission of the church is to glorify God and to bring that glory and that kingdom to the rest of the world that needs to hear and know. And like, increasingly, our culture is driving more towards singleness. And from the statistics, less people are getting married, or they're getting married much later in life. And so, gosh, it's just a lot harder for my wife and I and our family to reach out to a bunch of singles on a consistent basis and be present in the life of a bunch of singles, because their lives just look oftentimes different than mine. And so, just on the most practical would be, how are the singles a blessing to the church? You reach singles. You know what I mean? Like, the singles, you can go and reach and share the gospel and bring Jesus to these other singles that you or I are just going to have naturally the same life.
They can flirt to convert.
They can flirt to convert.
We don't believe that.
You can Terry to marry. You know what I mean?
I haven't heard that one.
I'll just do that.
My dad says, if the Lord tarries.
If the Lord tarries, No, but you've told me he says that.
Says that a lot.
So I think that's good. So let's go to this next one. How can those who are not single love singles better? Like, what can we do?
Man, I think there's a lot of things. I think there's I think there's first just seeing them as a peer. I think there's a lot of things we could do, but I think there's a mindset. It kind of bums me out. A lot of times I hear people say, in general, everywhere, not just the church, but like, I'm married now, that guy, he's still single. I don't know, we're not on the same stage. We can't be as good of friends anymore. I don't really quite get them. And man, I feel like some of my best friendships were while I was married, and then I had a single person. Yeah. And I feel like it didn't alter my friendship with them at all. And so it makes me go, we change our perspective and we go like, oh, I've reached this level that they're not at. And it's like, no, like, you just have a different things to steward than what they have to steward. And so I think change your perspective and think of them as peers, and not demean them in your thoughts about them. I think that another big thing is to include them in our lives, like just include them in our families, and look for ways to do that. I think I love that you brought up, it's hard for families sometimes to include singles, and so sometimes that takes built-in time and trust to do that. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, a lot of you guys remember Emma, of course, and she was in our RC when it started back in whenever it was. Yeah. And so she was with us when we were married with no kids. She was with us when we were married with one kid, and then all the way up until, I think she was here when we had 2 kids. And so I know she was here when we had 2 kids, but I don't know if she was here when we had 3 kids. She wasn't. So anyways, all that to say, like, man, having Emma in our family was a huge blessing to us. Yeah. And I know that Emma would say it was a huge blessing to her too, and that she was thankful for that, and thankful that she got to be a part of that, and that I think there was family things in my life that were redeemed because she was a part of our family, and then there was family things in her life that were redeemed because she was a part of our family. Yeah, it's so good. So I think that's and it might be a slow process. Like, if you're a family, you're like, man, I'd love to do that. It just might be a slow process for you, and that's okay too, because I don't think you should just let someone just all of a sudden see everything to just do everything to include a single in your family all of a sudden, but work towards that. Go that direction. Increase intimacy in healthy ways. And so, those are some ways I think we can love. Yeah, I love the inclusion into the family thing. Obviously, there's a handful of people that we would say like are part of, like you said before, like these singles just become family, and they're legitimate people that I know Verity and I, that we feel that we try and have in our home. Yeah. That legitimately they're as close to that, like sister/daughter, you know what I mean, like aunt, in that realm, of, and then so like aunt to my boys type of thing, uncle to my boys, and so I think like that stuff is massive. It's like so healing and restorative and beautiful, and I would really say like if you are if you're not single, married, or whatever that looks like, whatever your story is,
and you're looking a way to do that, like even just talk to us about it. You know what I mean? Like, if you know some singles in your life, like invite them for dinner and just let them kind of be part of your rhythms in life and things like that. And honestly, we have received, I think, probably more in those relationships than we've given. But man, they've been really, really good and really helpful. And so I'd say like there's this thinking intentionally through our speech, and you and I think easily can. I mean, there's some amens that we could hear out on the other side of this wall from the jokes that can be made, and I think just being really wise and cautious with some of that, because it can come off as, you say like, hey, so are you dating yet? Or, you know what I mean? Or, an attractive guy walks in and you say to a young single in your life, like, hey, so, sparks or whatever, And I think that can just create that culture, and I don't think it's intentional, but it does breed some of that as well. And so I think just how can we be wise about our speech and what we're saying, even unintentionally, in the midst of that is super important. So
make sure they're only good jokes, not.
I would say just clear them with Anthony and I, and then like, is this funny enough to make it worth it? I'm kidding, obviously. So that's the idea. This is a great question from Alicia. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to even say, like Kaylee and Jess can attest to this. We will tease around about this topic and with them and stuff, and they'll say too much, and they're right. And there's been times where I've purposely, myself, put a moratorium on any jokes like that to them, because. And I haven't said that to them or whatever.
You just did.
Well, yeah. No, but I'm just saying, like, I'm not like, I'm not gonna make these jokes anymore or whatever. But I'm like, I need to dial it.
Jokes.
Kaylee says only.
She gets it.
There you go. All right. No, but yeah, I just my own kind of this is I need to make sure to speak more into their identity as a person and their identity in God than their singleness. But I think Alicia's question is good too.
Yeah, so. It's great. So if you guys can see this the comment there, it just says like, what can the church do structurally, which I love that, to encourage single people. For example, the church often has several family and married oriented groups and events, and I would say like we don't have a ton of necessarily married groups that are specific, like you need to be married to be part of this or anything like that. We have done a couple of marriage conferences, I think, in the past over the last 7 years. But
and we've also done single ones.
And we've done that's right. We've done one single conference and stuff. That being said, I think when we start talking through the way we do groups and the way we do these things, because I think how do we continue to press people into discipleship and make Jesus the hero, the savior, the one that's worth chasing, following after. For me, so from a structural standpoint, it's just, are we looking through all of this content of what we're trying to communicate, preach, share within our small groups, whatever, mentorship programs, that what we're pressing people towards is Jesus, first and foremost. So it's really a content-driven question. Versus a structural situation, because I don't know if you or I would necessarily be, and I'll say this but maybe we would, but I don't know if we'd ever do a singles event. That we haven't done events like that in the past. I don't know if we would necessarily say that's the answer.
Would.
You think I would?
just call you out.
So I don't know if that would be something that we would personally do, but I know churches that have done that, and they have kind of singles groups or whatever it may be. I'll say this, my fear in some of that is because there's so much of this baggage of you got to find someone, that when you do the singles group, it becomes this thing like, we're creating this so you can find your significant other, which again, we want to just move single and married and everywhere in between to a place of just loving and adoring Christ. So that was a long-winded answer to say, I don't know, like, on a structural level outside of content, at least in this moment, but I'd love to hear it.
I think that in all the ways we are trying to teach families to live out their vocations and steward their vocations as fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, all the ways that we try to do that, we should try to have a similar amount, if not equal amount, of teaching on how to live out our vocation as a single person too. And so that would be one thing that I would say. So I would almost say that we when we do a family event or a parent event or whatever, that we should think, okay, do we have another event? Because a lot of our family events are teaching it, like teaching how to parent well. Then maybe we need an event that's
how do you single well?
How do you single well? How do you date well? Like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's one way. I think the other thing is, and this is, I think, structural, but we wouldn't see it as this. Every Roots lunch that we've taught, when we talk about community, one, just how we teach about community, I think presses against the idea that we should just be in groups with people just like us.
Yeah.
But then we also teach on, one of the ideas we teach on in there is appreciate diversity. And so this is a structural thing we teach because we want singles and marrieds in relationship with each other. We want singles and elders, that generation, elders in relationship with people that are retired in relationship with each other. We want these relationships to happen, which in the last however many years of the church, they don't happen as often. And so I think really the best way we can structure this and chase after this is to push all of our groups to have to appreciate diversity and appreciate who's there no matter what walk of life they're in. And so yeah, I think that's a thing we do every month structurally, but I think we also have to teach on that, talk about that, exemplify that, all those things. So that would be some of my thoughts on it.
Yeah,
so,
no, I agree with that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, no, I was gonna make a stupid joke. So it wasn't very good.
Good job. Well done.
Yeah.
Let's get to this next question. It says, "Is it wrong to be single or to even encourage singleness?" And I'll jump in this one at first. I mean, very clearly, no. Not wrong to be single. Not wrong to encourage singleness. If that's true, then the scriptures we have to wrestle with, where Paul encourages singleness. Be single as I am, that you might have an undivided heart, and that kind of speaks back to the freedom and the opportunity to you care for you and the Lord. So I think just absolutely not wrong to be that, and I would even go beyond to say it is beneficial in many ways that. Again, hopefully, if you've been listening, we've talked about that we need to herald more often. You've heard oftentimes the way singleness gets kind of talked about is it gets talked about as like, oh, what's this gift that you receive, and class like Chandler's like, you feel like I'm going to return this gift. You know what I mean? I burn with passion, that type of idea. So the reality of I think people think when you might say, hey, no, this singleness thing could be a gift for you. It's not saying that like, hey, there's this deliverable that now you wear this for the rest of your life. And then at some point, once you've received this gift, that's like waiting out there for God to give you this gift of singleness, that then now you can live in that gift. It's saying like, if you're single right now, it is a gift, period, right? Like, because you are able to operate, as Paul says, with an undivided heart, you do have more time, freedom to pursue the Lord. You can do things that non-single folk cannot do. And so just saying like, it's a gift right now for you to walk in this moment. And that doesn't necessarily, it doesn't fix the emotional difficulty that some, we know from talking to people that you experience of, I want to be married or I want this. But it does, I think, help us understand that you don't have to get any place as a single person for you to be living in the way God has intended for your life, for your vocation, for your calling, to be a blessing unto Him and to the church and to the world. Like, you are gifted with singleness because you're single. And so live in that gift.
I think to touch on the gift thing too, it's funny because I've seen singleness put in like spiritual giftings, like thing. Sometimes they'll just put celibacy in particular, but I've seen singleness. And I don't know if that's an accurate description. I think often when we try to categorize the spiritual gifts in the Bible, I think we're off on it sometimes. But let's say it was. But the spiritual gifts, sorry, I'm almost pulling this out, so I'm making sure. The spiritual gifts are always used to bless the world. You know what I mean? Or in some way, bless others in some way. So when God gives us gifts, we are blessed to be a blessing. So even though like we might not want a gift that we have, God can use it to bless and love and care for the world. And so when somebody is single, God can use that to bless the world through your singleness. And I think we see that a lot in our church, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
I just to kind of touch on that.
No, I just really quick. I just say we would just encourage there's even just looking at some of the names that are on here. Angie. Hey, Angie.
No, Angie.
Angie. What's up?
Louisiac.
I think although recently not single, but
I don't know.
Well, we're
Let
trying
us
to get
know.
involved in that. Yeah, let us know in the
Angie.
comments. If you just put up his picture, that'd be great, Angie. But just looking at the names, very specifically, Redemption Church Flagstaff would not be where we are without the singles that are invested in this ministry and in our church. And I don't just even mean that from an output. I mean literally from an internal heart level.
Yeah.
I love Jesus more because of so many of the people that are on this thread, that are watching, that aren't ever going to watch this, but are in our community.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this very practically for us, we would not be a fraction. I mean, Jesus is faithful, but right, we wouldn't be a fraction of who we are internally, externally without the singles in our life.
I mean, a part of our theology is we think God has put each of us here to care for the world, love the world, restore, be part of that restoration process. And so if our church doesn't have singles, there's an aspect of we're missing and caring for and loving the world in the ways that singles can love and care and be they themselves a gift to the world and gift to us, like you're saying. So
that's good.
I think that's huge. I like what Kaylee said. It was more in regards kind of just talking about her own experience as a single in the church and Christians inviting her into families. And she says this: it's been incredibly healing for me to be a part of families and to see healthy marriages. Jesus has used families that have welcomed me in beautiful ways to offer comfort, learning about relationships, communication, forgiveness, and partnering together. I'm so thankful for this. So that's a cool perspective too, of just even Kaylee's humble heart, even of being a learner and seeing how much a blessing being part of a family has blessed her and helped her to grow. And so another encouragement to us and families to include singles in our family, because the reality is they are in our family. That's how the scripture just defines it. Right. Is anyone that's a Christian is in our family, and so we need to act as such. I really think we do. So and just add this, even just as we kind of start getting towards the end here, feel free if there's any other questions, thoughts, comments, please. These have been really helpful to hear from you and dialogue about some of these things, and even just share your thoughts and encourage all of us in this. But just there, because the culture is even moved, so singleness, even in the way the world and our culture would talk about it, is so different from what we're talking about today, what the scripture would talk about, that I want to empathize as much as I can with the singles also, and to say there is a reality that I know a lot of our single friends and singles in our church do want to be married. Some don't, and that's awesome too. And that's okay that they want.
And that's the thing, to affirm that in you. You want that, great. That's a thing that's great to want, right? Yeah. And so if that's true, we want to affirm that in you. In the same vein, want to say but that's not ultimately this great fulfillment. It doesn't change your value, identity. But it's also a good thing to pursue if that's where you're at. And to know that as you do things that way, you're doing them counter to the way our culture is just kind of this, hey, if I feel lonely, I'll just go find someone like that. And so even just doing singleness in such a way that is patient and waits upon the Lord and seeks wise counsel is a beautiful thing, because it is contrary to a world that is just searching for love in all the wrong places, for lack of a better song title. But so I think that reality, to honor you, many single friends and family that we have at the church, to say so many of you you're running a race that I know can be emotionally difficult and can be weighty, and we see you and we love you and we know that's part of your story for a lot of you, but gosh, in the midst of it, God just sees you as whole right now, and does long to give you the desires of your heart in His timing and what that looks like. So
that's good. Well, unless there's any questions that pop up, I think that's kind of all our thoughts on singleness. So,
resources, there's a couple books.
I mean, the one that I'm hearing the most positive stuff about right now is it's by Sam Alberry, who he himself says he struggles with same-sex attraction. And that he's had to navigate what it means to have a celibate and single life. And so he wrote a book called 7 Myths About Singleness. And so that's the one I'm hearing the most positive stuff about. We have another book in here that I know Jess Tenery liked called Single Dating, Engaged Marriage. She really liked what the author had to say about being single in general. I remember her being encouraged by that. So those would be 2 resources off the top of my head. So
please continue to reach out to us, talk to us, engage with people. Again, if you're on the non-single end of this thing, man, try and hang out with singles, you know, and make them part of the family and all that kind of stuff. And as we do that, hopefully the idea is that we do this all together, and what is formed is this more beautiful culture that is the church, that reflects Jesus, that reflects the community and kind of people of God in the midst of it all. So anyway, man, love you. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you on Sunday.
All right, guys.
God bless you. Are you turning it off?
I'll turn it off for you.
Hey, I get to do the farewell. And so I'll just sit